Sup everyone, Paul Clark here. Sup Paul. November 11th, 2022. I am almost 50 years old. So fitting, this is the 50th episode of the Sup Paul podcast. Welcome. In this episode, we're talking with Katie Wood, a physiologist from Ontario, Canada. She's an equestrian, she's an adventurer, she's a paddleboarder. An interesting conversation is afoot. Interestingly enough, this is actually recorded as a Instagram live feed. So enjoy, welcome, let's do this.
Here we go.
Where are you at, Katie?
Oh, I'm in Ontario right now. I'm just sitting outside my home in Guelph, and it's too beautiful a day to sit inside, so I'm just out here doing some work with my tea.
I like your style. And so I'll have you introduce yourself here in a moment, but the reason why I've invited you to be on this first Instagram Live, which will be a part of the SUPPAUL podcast, is because I was inspired by your boldness and your bravery. You were part of a River Sup clinic hosted by Bow Valley Sup in Canada. David Manning, Maggie Mills, and Ryan Hamilton were all part of that. So I met you. I was inspired by your boldness and learning how to do that. And then following your Instagram afterwards, I see that you really are a adventurous person. If you can't find someone to hike with, you're going to do it. And you're going to celebrate being capable and independent yourself. So without further ado, Katie, introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from?
Well, thanks very much. I am, Katie Wood. I am a physiotherapy resident now, no longer a student, from Ontario. So I grew up in the Kawarthas, about 2 hours north of Toronto. And then the last 10 years I've been living in Guelph, did a couple degrees at the university here, and then went to the University of Toronto for my physiotherapy degree. And I am an avid outdoors woman. I grew up an equestrian, so I competed in horseback riding, specifically in a competition known as eventing, which is kind of like a horse triathlon. And then, last few years, I've just kind of been bit a little bit by the outdoor spirit. Taken up a lot more hiking, bought my first paddleboard a few years ago, and then just kind of dove headfirst into that. And then the last few months, I've been out in Alberta, actually on my last student placement, which is where I really got introduced into the whitewater side of paddleboarding. So that bug bit me a little bit too.
So let's go right into the river paddleboarding part of it. I'm going to talk more about other elements of your life, but given that I really try to be a voice for river paddleboarding, people being introduced to it, people who are more advanced into it, what was the attraction to you? Why did you see a river and say, hey, can you paddleboard on that?
So, I mean, initially, I'd been paddleboarding just flat water for a few years, got my first paddleboard, just like a Canadian Tire, $400 something or other, and taught myself for the most part on that. And, started getting interested in the idea of touring, like being able to go on and do overnight trips on paddleboards. And the one thing about touring is that if you want to go long distances on flat water, it's a lot of work and it's just kind of boring sometimes. You have fun when you get to the sites and all of that, but the idea of being able to do rivers and being able to do like moving water and travel further distances really was attractive to me. And so when I actually got this placement in Alberta and decided to go out to do that 3-month stint, I was looking into different courses in the area, knowing that paddleboarding was a little bit bigger out there too. And I stumbled across Bow Valley Sup, shout out to Ryan Hamilton, David Manning, Maggie Mills, those wonderful people. So I immediately signed up for their Intro to River Sup course, not knowing what to expect at all. And it was amazing. They were so incredible. It was, a really nice introduction to just practicing some eddy turns, getting used to dealing with current, getting used to just being able to feel moving water and feel the difference between that and flat water paddleboarding. And so that a little bit of a bug, a little bit of okay, this isn't bad. This is kind of fun. And my main goal was just to get confident on moving water, but then decided to step things up a little bit with the encouragement mostly of Ryan and David.
Yeah.
And so Bow Valley happened to have their intermediate SUP course the next weekend, which in my mind, I was kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm probably not ready for this, but it's kind of a once in a lifetime thing. So I'm going to do it anyway. And I spoke to Ryan at the intro course and I said, Like, is it safe? Should I be doing this? Like, I want to do it, but am I going to die? And he's like, nah, you'll probably be fine. So I signed up for it, and then I ended up doing that course the next weekend. So that was just like, it was a 2 day course between the Bow and the Kananaskis River, learning a little bit more about like actually doing some different elements, actually playing with some rapids a little bit, and just working on a little more of the whitewater skills. And it was like the first day I was absolutely terrified, and I was kind of like, am I even good enough for this? Am I good enough to go back for the second day? But then the second day, it was like, it was amazing. You were there. The group had so much fun. Just, playing in the little stuff, but just getting used to it and just getting your feet wet, quite literally.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, yeah, it just grew. So I really, again, credit to Bow Valley. They were the ones that really supported me and got me into this. But I started booking some sessions with David Manning. He took me out on my touring board, actually, which is a bit like driving a limousine on a river. Like, it wasn't the best, but he took me out on that on the Bow River. Did a lesson on that, and then we did a few lessons on the Kananaskis as well. And he was just fantastic instructor, amazing. And I had been renting boards up until then, but then I took the dive and I bought my first river sup from Hala.
Yeah.
I bought a Hala Hacha, and I brought it home with me. So yeah, we're going to continue this journey.
And a couple of things that you said in there that I want to talk about. One, Ryan's comment of, "Yeah, I think you'll be fine. Go do it." Uh, that type of vague encouragement is sometimes really necessary. The river is a dynamic area, and you can't guarantee anything. You can't guarantee safety. You can't guarantee fun. Had you had any river experience, moving water experience before taking these courses on your paddleboard?
Oh, absolutely nothing. I did not grow up on the water at all. I grew up on horseback. And so I was used to challenging myself, and I was used to being, competitive in that way, and being athletic, but I had never been on moving water before.
And you just thought, well, I see it that it's something that's there, and so I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah,
How did you get
exactly.
into How did you get into paddleboarding? Again, that was the tour on lakes in Ontario.
Yeah, so essentially, like back in, I don't know, whatever it was, 2018, 2017, something like that, I paddleboard was growing. I had seen a couple articles on it. I thought this looked really fun. And I just went and bought like the discount, the Canadian Tire, which is our like Canadian, general supply store. But like a Costco brand, paddleboard. And I was like,
Sure.
yeah, let's go. And then I started going out on local lakes. I started pushing myself a little bit, doing some longer tours. A couple years after that, I bought a proper touring board from Red Paddle,
Hmm.
and then started pushing myself to do some overnight trips. But then I was like, what's the next step? Okay, the next step is moving water. Let's go with that.
And you went to one of the epicenters of river paddleboarding in North America. I work in the industry. I represent River Paddleboard brand Hala. I'm in the southeast right now in Asheville, where river paddleboarding is a thing. The Pacific Northwest, where I'm from, it's a thing. But the Canadian Rockies, the West Kootenays, you were in the area where you have people like David Manning, Bow Valley, Rita Boychuk. Rita is one
Hmm.
of those people who are putting a lot of people on the water in safe ways, confidence. The community is growing. So you were there. You probably couldn't avoid it, and now you're a
Yeah,
river paddleboarder.
exactly.
And thank you so much for that. And a part of the series that I'm doing right now really highlights the fact that I believe the future of river paddleboarding is female. Women are taking courses. There is a curriculum out there that they're following. And one thing that I think is really fantastic about river paddleboarding is that it is you yourself piloting your own craft. If you're a whitewater kayaker, you might be in a position where you need to have other people around to be watching, being safety, whatnot. In fact, the river ethos is more people, the merrier for safety. But you're a little bit different. I don't know if you've been paddling solo on the river, but you've definitely been hiking solo in the mountains. That's not always the most common. I don't find the most common. Your social media has been really highlighting your solo adventures. And you told me, and this is one of the reasons I really wanted to reach out, you told me you got some backlash for being a solo adventurer. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so a lot of it just had to do with this mentality of I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait for someone else to give me permission, or for someone else to say, Oh yeah, okay. Now I'm finally free this weekend to have these experiences. And so kind of the default is okay, put on your big girl panties and we're going to do it ourselves. Because yeah, otherwise you miss out on so much just because adults' lives are busy. Like we just don't have a lot of time to meet up and coordinate and and like I love my friends, but they're even then like you're not always going to have someone that's guaranteed to do the things that you want to do. So that was a big step towards the solo thing. In terms of the backlash, like, yeah, I've gotten it in person. I've gotten it online, where people say, oh, this is really irresponsible of you. Oh my gosh, you should really be more careful. Like something's going to happen. This is really unsafe. Like this is mostly just, yeah, people blaming me and thinking that it's really irresponsible for me to do these things. And I'm not necessarily disagreeing. Like obviously it is riskier to be solo and especially to be a solo woman out there. But at the same time, I'm not really one to live my life behind those fears. And I'm as safe as I can be. I take precautions where I can. Like when I was on the trails, I was definitely carrying bear mace. I was very vocal, like the normal bear safety of like yelling every few minutes. I would sing atrociously, very loudly. To sometimes people would come around the corner and I'd apologize, be like, "I'm so sorry you had to hear that." But that telling people where I'm going, make sure I have a plan that everyone knows that like, okay, I'm planning to, leave the trailhead at this time. It should be a 2-hour hike. I'll be back by this point. Had my emergency beacon on me most of the times, especially if I was in a place, where I knew I was going to be out of service. So yeah, like trying to make it as safe as I can, but at the same time, not letting those fears and those doubts hold me back from the experiences that I want to have.
Who typically is the person who's giving you negative feedback in those? Is it a gender? Is it a demographic? Is it your friends? Is it strangers? Are they strangers?
Yeah, I mean, random people that you meet hiking for one, they all seem to have opinions. And I would say not so much a specific gender, but an age group, like definitely older individuals, people who are not specifically to quantify a generation like say boomers, but just people who are in their 40s, 50s, a little bit, maybe grew up in a more traditional time where it's, you go out as a pair, you do things as a pair, and seeing a female, without a partner, without someone there to, be a group, like just kind of taking her own initiative to do these things was maybe a little off-putting for some people's, stigmas that they had in their head of what they should be seeing.
For the people who are watching this Instagram live, have comments. Are you solo travelers yourself? Are you motivated by solo travelers? We definitely want to read your comments and maybe address those. When I began as a paddleboarder about 10 years ago, I was really intrigued by the fact that you could go as a single person to a wilderness spot. For me, it was a lake in Central Oregon, but I quickly realized that if you're going to do multi-day trips on a paddleboard in Central Oregon, in Oregon in general, it's going to be on the rivers. So I had a pretty good reputation right off the bat as being the duffel bag paddleboarder. I was going to Alaska in the open water. I was going to Panama in the open water, Baja in the open water. But once I got onto rivers, people were like, nope, you don't know anything about rivers. You need other people. So I got a lot of backlash for being a solo river paddler, to the point where my reputation kind of tanked because I was demonstrating, according to a larger river audience, irresponsibility. Have you been able to put your river paddleboarding into a solo experience?
So, not as of yet, and I'd like to. That a little bit was more just because I was still very much in the learning phase, and I had no whitewater experience to begin at all. So, yeah, as of right now, like I've done a few lessons with David, which have been amazing, incredible. I have done the courses with Bow Valley, and my plan for next year is I want to plan a couple trips. So there's a couple nice rivers that are popular canoeing destinations in Ontario here. One, like more sort of the French River, is a very traditional canoeing hub, kind of class 1-2 rapids, but easily portageable if you think that there's something going to be too much for you or the water's too low or whatever. And then maybe the Sand River, which is up north a little bit closer to Lake Superior. It comes off of Lake Superior. the north coast of Lake Superior, and that one again is known to be like a nice introductory river. Can be a 4 or 5 day trip, and so
Hmm.
these are things that I have planned in my head to do next year. And yeah, like I am very open, and I'm not, like obviously there's always like some fear, because you'd be dumb if you didn't have any. But I am very open to planning these experiences, definitely reaching out, doing my research, making sure that I have as much safety as I can going in. But then, yeah, like I don't want to be held back by waiting for someone else to go with me to do that. These are things that I want to do, and I don't necessarily need to wait for someone else to give me permission to do it. So, yeah, they haven't done any yet, but they're in the works. They're being planned. In Ontario, unfortunately, there aren't as many sites that for fall paddling, just because, like the Kananaskis is lovely because it's dam controlled, so it can go year round. Here, we're a little more reliant on just spring paddling is bigger, and then there's a few bigger rivers like the Ottawa is like a perfect example that you can go for longer.
Well, Katie, you articulated being solo and responsible really well, and I encourage people to follow your Instagram because I think it's motivating. You have an interesting style of editing, a lot of little flash cuts that show you in lakes and on rivers and on the top of mountaintops, and often with mixed audio of motivation being by yourself. And in fact, your reel today talks about introducing yourself with a little Jay-Z on the background.
Yeah.
You're an equestrian, you're a paddleboarder, you're a hiker. Going back to your roots as an equestrian, talk about a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, that was my main sport growing up. I grew up on a farm. My parents bred horses, so it was very natural for me to just become a rider. I competed quite a bit, so in this sport that's called eventing, which is, yeah, it's a bit like an equestrian triathlon, and the mentality of it is that we're about as crazy as triathloners as well. It is one of the more dangerous equestrian sports because there are higher risk of fatalities and injuries just by the nature of the sport. The one phase, there's 3 phases. The one phase cross country, it's getting better, but traditionally the jumps were solid obstacles. They don't fall down. So if you think of your traditional, like what you see on TV, the horse jumping, when they hit the poles will knock down. So, the momentum gets put into the pole, and typically there aren't too many falls or, injuries. If a horse hits a solid jump, you can imagine that amount of momentum will either flip the horse or like send you off in some random direction. And so that can be really dangerous. And I've had my fair share of rather scary falls as well doing that. Which, maybe equestrian in general isn't really thought of as this like, badass high energy sport. People think it's kind of posh and prissy, but yeah, it does really breed in this mentality and this grit. Like it breeds grit into a lot of people that do it because it's not an easy sport. When I got in through university and I was just, off on my own and spending more time with school, it went to the wayside a little bit. So I haven't competed in a few years, but I just do mostly stuff for pleasure now, and a little bit of fox hunting on the side.
Fox
Partially
hunting.
too. Yeah. Again, sort of people picture this very traditionalistic British, you know, high society type thing, but it is really quite fun. Like you get to see the countryside, you get to really enjoy nature, you get to really experience the hounds working, which is fantastic to see because they are just such an amazing working dog to watch and to witness. And it's just that's really fun. So I really enjoy that, and my family's been fox hunting for 4 generations, so it was a rite of passage. I had to do it at some point. But partially too, I took a step back with the riding a few years ago just because of a car accident that I was in. So I had to take a little bit of time to recover for that.
So you are certainly no stranger to individual activities. Riding a horse, you're piloting your own craft if a horse is a
Exactly.
craft.
The
And
parallels are amazing, actually.
oh, I imagine. And my buddy Cami Swan, she comes from an equestrian background where she actually does gymnastics on a horse.
Hmm.
So when she's a when that translated into river paddleboarding, you can see that equestrian stance in her. So yeah, you're informed from an early age about being brave in a moving environment by yourself.
Hmm.
Wonderful. And fox hunting, what? Fox hunting. I don't know anything about fox hunting, so find people out there. Everybody who's watching this, find people who do something different than you. We have a tendency to find our own tribe, which is great, but finding people who are doing something different and learning from them, that's what this hopefully will become. You mentioned your car accident.
Yeah.
What's that story? And how did
So
that derail your life for a little bit?
yeah, that was a big story. And for a long time, I kind of identified it as this car accident victim too. So that's been challenging to overcome. But so that was back in 2017. I was heading on a highway outside of Guelph. Going to the barn after work. I was a waitress at the time. I was doing my master's, so I was right in the middle of my studies. And yeah, I was going up to the barn to ride my horse, and another driver crossed the center line and just hit me head on. I had no time to respond. There was another driver in front of me who had time to ditch his truck, so he actually rolled a few times, but then I just kind of saw this truck ditching itself for some reason, and then right in front of me, there was another vehicle. So I had no time to respond. I don't remember most of the emergency scene type stuff. I was diagnosed with, I had a pretty bad concussion, a few broken bones. Most of my, like kind of half my chest was broken, my collarbone, lung punctured, a whole shebang. I was in hospital for a few days. And after that, the orthopedic injuries, like the bones and stuff, they would have healed. They did heal. But the concussion side of things really derailed my plan at that time, because I had been trying to get into veterinary school actually, and that's why I'd been doing this master's degree, was so that I could get some research, I could apply to veterinary school, I could get in hopefully to be a veterinarian. But because of the concussion and all of the cognitive symptoms and the vision symptoms and the memory systems and like the symptoms with focus and everything, I had just so much trouble committing myself to my studies for a long time. So basically everything that I wanted to do got very abbreviated into something small and manageable that I could at least just get it done. And so after that, the whole vet school dream kind of petered out, and I was left a little bit with, okay, what do I do now? Where am I left to go? And so yeah, and it took a long time too to get out of that mentality of being, okay, I'm a car accident victim now, I'm injured, I'm broken, because not all, I would say the insurance system in Ontario is amazing because it does give you access to a lot of care like physiotherapy and psychological services and cognitive services, vision therapies, that kind of stuff that you need. But it does unfortunately produce a bit of a victim mentality in the way that it's structured. And so I was kind of caught up in that for a few years, and it took me some time to kind of work myself out of it and figure it out. I worked as a vet assistant for a while, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And eventually I decided, with the encouragement of my employers at the time, I decided, okay, let's pivot. Let's figure out a new path. And that's when I applied to physiotherapy school, which has been, I think, the best decision. And I think that this is probably a better career path for me as a person than vet would have been. So,
Mm-hmm.
a little bit of one door closes, a window opens. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. You don't know it at the time, but I've did my 2 years of physiotherapy school. So now I am a resident physiotherapist here in Ontario, and that has been such a huge part of my own growth and my own recovery too. And now I'm hoping to pass that on to my patients, pass on those experiences, pass on, that knowledge and that determination as much as I can to help them through their journeys as well.
Personal experience to inform your treatment with patients. That's wonderful. How is your body now?
It's not, I mean, I still deal with a lot of chronic pain. I still deal with headaches. I still deal with vision issues, just left over from the brain injury. So those are all still present in my life, but I no longer identify with those as, those being who I am. Those are just
Mm-hmm.
things that I experience. I used to have those as kind of identifiers. Those were kind of labels to me. And
Mm-hmm.
now I can't tell you when this mental shift happened, but I feel like I've moved past that point. And now those are just things that I experience and I deal with and I manage, but they are not who I am, if that makes
So
sense.
the victim was not on your Jay-Z reel today.
No, no. And it's just, for a long time too, like that was a big part of my life. And in conversations when I was introducing myself, somehow the car accident would come up. But, now there are certain situations where it's still relevant and I talk about it, but for the most part, it is not something that I identify with as this is who I am. It's more just this is an experience that happened to me.
Wonderful, Katie. Again, well articulated. Remind me how old you are.
I'm 28.
28.
Yeah, 94 baby.
Oh, goodness. A world of wisdom in those relatively short years. So tell us your social media handle.
So it's Physio Outdoors, or at Physio Outdoors, which I changed recently. Just I used to just be my name, but yeah, I kind of wanted to embody that persona a little bit, at least on social media. Obviously, we all know, the glimpse you see on social media is not the full depth of who someone is as a human, but I really wanted to encapsulate the experiences of being outdoors, and from a physio rehab perspective, and just a health management perspective for the populations, how beneficial that can really be. So that's what I've been trying to highlight. That and the solo stuff has been really what I'm trying to highlight in my social media.
Do you consider yourself a content creator? I do think you have a unique style of editing. You do bring cameras with you, GoPros, phones, etc. You mount them in unique ways. You did have a crash reel, I think, recently, where you were falling in the lake as you're setting it up with the concept of reality versus what's on Instagram.
Yeah.
How does your story and how does your behavior change knowing that you're documenting the experiences, your solo experiences, that you're, in a position of influencing or motivating other people?
That's a great question. I think a little bit of why I started to document that stuff and try and share it a little bit more is because I do travel solo quite a bit, and I had gotten quite a lot into solo adventuring, and I wanted to share it. I wanted to be, when you're on top of a mountain and you're at this beautiful lookout and you see this, absolutely gorgeous landscape spread out in front of you and you're alone. Sometimes it's a little bit, there's that little voice in the back of your head saying, oh, well, this would be really nice if there was someone else to kind of reminisce about this with and kind of really, mirror the emotions that you're feeling in that situation. So yeah, mostly it started as a way to try and bring my family and friends into things that I was experiencing. That's what I really wanted to get out of it. I still don't really think of myself as a content creator because I think 90-something% of my followers are still probably just people that I know, friends, family, stuff like that. So more, I think it's because I really want to be able to share these experiences and motivate the people that I love, and the people that I know, and the people I have a connection with. But that being said, if it grows beyond that, and if it spreads to other people, feeling inspired and feeling like they've gotten to share a little bit of that emotion or a little bit of that, that wonder or whatever, when I share these things, then, that's fantastic. The more the merrier. The beautiful thing about social media is that, it is kind of, this big, vast chamber that you can just yell into, and it can go as far as it wants. So that's why I really try and send these, messages of, positivity, determination, grit, whatever you want to call it, or, and just try and really relay the benefits of these, these experiences and getting outside, so that more people maybe feel inspired to do that as well.
Wonderful. And I think that's great. Instagram has become this, I don't want to call it a cesspool, but we're bombarded with a variety of other messages that take our time. And so I'm really glad whenever I see a post of yours, like, oh, what's she up to? What type of positive comment is she presenting, including your drive back to Ontario from Alberta? Like you had all these spots that you were going to camp and paddle at, but then it rained, and then it rained some more, and then it never stopped raining.
It was a complete contrast to what today is, because we are now well into November and it's like 16 degrees out and beautiful and sunny. And the beginning of October through Northern Ontario was just horrendous weather. And so, plans got derailed. I had this wonderful epic trip planned. I was going to do like 4 different camping trips kind of throughout at these different very very well-known Ontario sites that are just, these milestones of achievement to say that you've done this, you've been here, you you went there, but it shrunk a lot more than I expected it to, because at some point it's not fun. I don't mind toughing it out. I don't mind, dealing with the elements, Mother Nature, things that get thrown at you, because that is just life, and at some point you have to deal with that. But I was electing to do those things, and if I was just going to be cold, wet, and miserable for 2 weeks, it's not as much fun. And the forecast is, it's one thing too, if you have like one day of rain and then a day of sun, and then at least you have something to break it up. But no, I did a few nights. I did do a few things, and I did a few nights outdoors, and just my clothes just never dried. So there are a few things that I want to revisit, and a few things that I've tabled for potentially next year, maybe earlier, like later September or something, where I could try and revisit these places, try and actually kind of, do that trip that I had planned as intentioned. But we'll save that for another day.
Save for another day. And I always like to use the river and river paddling as a metaphor for life. And you already mentioned the term that I use a lot, is pivoting. When you're in a flat water paddle where you see your destination many miles away and you just paddle straight that entire time, that's like watching your bonds portfolio grow over time. But on the river, you're always changing. I couldn't be a road cyclist. Mountain biking for sure, where you're just changing and you're affecting the terrain is affecting your decision making. I love rivers for that. I love mountain biking for that, being in the woods for that. And I think I really do better in my own life when I'm able to pivot and change on a regular basis. So for me, the river really is a metaphor for life. What type, you mentioned earlier some of the rivers that you're looking to paddle next year. What type of moving water is near you? Where will you have the opportunity to paddle over the next couple of months?
So a few different places. I'm in Guelph, so the Grand River is one that is the most commonly known through southern Ontario. That being said, certain sections might still be paddleable. Other sections are just going to be too low, and you're just going to be probably wading through mud for the most part. And then, we'll see. In the spring, there's a few places so close to my parents is the Kawartha, or my parents' cottage is the Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park, and the Mississauga River runs through there. So that's one that it's like, a 2-day trip. You could do it in one. It'd be like maybe 10, 12 hours if you wanted to do it. That's one that I'm hoping to do in the spring when the water's a little bit higher. I did go and look at it last 2 weeks ago, but it's just really low right now. And then, we'll see. There's actually a group that I've connected with. Again, love social media. I posted on a whitewater page, does anyone do stand-up paddleboarding in Ontario? And within a few hours, I was part of a Facebook chat with 4 other people, and half of them know David and the other half know Ryan. And so hopefully connecting with them a little bit. There's the Ottawa River, that's a couple hours north of where my parents' cottage is, so that might be a few weekend trips as well.
The Ottawa is a famous river. I have not been on that side of Canada, but my buddy Julie Lane goes up there all the time. The godfather of river paddleboarding, Dan Gavir, is up there. Apparently there's some fantastic, amazing water at certain times of the year up there. So I think that should be a destination for both river paddleboarders and whitewater paddlers in general.
Absolutely. And then I don't know if anyone has ever really attempted to paddleboard it, or if that's just, a crazy thing, but, might try. About half an hour north of my parents' cottage as well is the Gull River Whitewater Preserve. And that is an actual, it's a course. It's an 800-meter course. There's kind of 2 sections. There's from the dam down to the waterfall, which is a slightly bigger section. And then from the waterfall down is a slightly smaller section. And so, I might spend some weekends in the spring and just go up there and try it out, see what happens, see if anyone yells at me. But
Sup Mama K2 just mentioned that the only whitewater she's paddled in Canada is the Ottawa with Dan Gavir and Harmony, his wife. A weekend event. So there's definitely events and activities up there. Mm-hmm. In the last few minutes that we have, I know that you're running off here. Thank you so much for your time. What advice do you have for people who are looking to get into the wilderness, but they find a lot of obstacles psychological obstacles as a barrier? Obviously, going solo if you need to, minimize that risk with responsibility. But what else do you have?
Yeah, so that's a great question too. Um, I'll probably fall back on the physio side of things a little bit, and just say, like, progressive overload is kind of our go-to, our bread and butter. As physios, we always say, okay, start with what you can do. If you've hurt your shoulder and you want to get to exercise, or if you're running and your ankle, you rolled your ankle, or you're dealing with some shin splints or something, start with what is tolerable. So if you can go out and do a 2-mile run, start there. Do a 2-mile run for, a couple weeks, and then build to a 3-mile run, and then build to a 4-mile run. If you're trying to learn how to weightlift, pick up 200 pounds off the ground deadlift. You don't start with 200 pounds. You start with the barbell. You start with 45 pounds. You work on your technique a little bit, and then you build from there. Maybe you add 5 pounds the next week. Maybe in the next week you add another 5 pounds. And so from a adventuring standpoint, same principles apply. Start with what is potentially a little bit outside your comfort zone, potentially pushing you a little bit, but you don't have to jump from never having done any outdoor adventures, never having paddled, never having, gone solo anywhere, to suddenly saying, I'm going to go do 20 miles up a mountain today. That's a big jump. So start with something that's a little more reasonable. Maybe you do a hike that is fairly well traversed. There's going to be a lot of other people there, within the range of what you feel comfortable doing, within a amount of, distance and elevation that you can handle. See how it goes. And if it feels amazing, then do a few more miles the next time you're out. And then the next time you're out, maybe plan something a little bit more. Maybe go to a place you've never been before. Maybe go somewhere a little more remote. But just build your confidence level from there, because if we always stay in our comfort zone, we're never pushing the boundaries. We're never growing. So always at least be trying to stick within the rim, kind of playing towards the outside of your comfort zone. And then all of a sudden your comfort zone goes from here to here to here. And suddenly you do way more than you ever thought you could.
Manageable goals and challenge your comfort zone without going too far at the initial moment. I've said it again. Well articulated, Katie. And it's actually Kristen Thomas who runs the Sup Connect Live that mentioned the comment that she paddled with Dan and Harmony up in Canada. So she's also an inspiration. I do think that the future of river paddleboarding in particular is female. And it's been wonderful meeting you and talking with you and learning about your growth in life, and also seeing your enthusiasm for running rivers on a paddleboard. That's dear to me. So I'm glad that more and more people are doing that. I'm hoping more and more people will follow you on Instagram, like Kristen Thomas just did, and see what's capable. And especially if you're not like me, I'm not familiar with equestrian. That's just it's social media is an opportunity to be exposed to things that you wouldn't normally. So you're one of those people, I think, who are one of those people who could show the world new and novel things with boldness and creativity. So thank you so much, Katie, for being a part of this, my first Instagram Live that will be a part of the SUPPAUL podcast series. Is there anything that you want to say before we wrap up?
No, it's been amazing. Thank you so much for inviting me. I was a little bit surprised to get the invite, but no, this has been great fun. Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. The people that I've had on my podcast, and I've been a little slow on my podcasts lately, the last few months, have been people like Chris Morgan, who runs big Class 5 whitewater, or Peter Hall, the owner of Hala. So I'm looking to actually broaden the voice, people who are just beginning, people who have a unique story, to encourage and show that it's possible for a lot of people. So thank you for being one of those people too, Katie, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye.